We are joined today by Mr. Russ Ford, Commissioner Russ Ford, of the Brazos County Commissioners Court, Precinct 2. Thank you so much for joining Think Brazos today.
Thank you, Charles.
So we wanted to hear a little bit first about who you are as far as how long you've been on the Commissioners Court, a little background about you, and then get into hopefully some of the issues facing Brazos County moving forward. So could you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Great. If you don't mind, I'll start telling you about this process.
All right.
Our former commissioner passed away in office. Sammy Catalina was a good friend and my neighbor out in the country.
Really?
I had hoped when Sammy got ready to retire that I might be considered at some point in the future, but certainly I didn't want it to happen the way that it did. Anyway, Mr. Catalina had passed away after the Republican primary, but before the general election. So the way that state law reads on that is that the Republican and the Democratic parties must hold a precinct convention, and I was elected by precinct convention, and then I ran in the general election against a Democratic candidate.
Okay, was that in 2020?
2020,
right?
yeah. I began serving in, I think, November 2020.
November 2020 as elected. So now we're 2 years later. So in November will be the final election, but it turns out that March 1st is really the deciding factor because the primary only has Republicans.
Exactly right. There are four candidates in the primary, and I think you'll smile whenever I tell you this, but at first I was slightly disappointed that there were so many people running, and then I realized that one of two things: either I make this job look so easy, or my opponents are going to make me better. In other words, I'll become more informed and more in touch with the constituents through this process. So I think it's good for me. Yeah.
That's a good point. And this is one of the, if I'm not mistaken, for a couple of decades now, this is probably one of the most contested that Precinct 2 is seen.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and for our audience, Precinct 2 is the northeast quadrant, I guess,
the
more
way,
or less,
the way
of
I
the
describe
county?
it is that, yes, we go all the way to the Navasota River on the east.
Okay.
On the north, OSR is a boundary, and then it comes into town. We take in Miramont, Copperfield, Wheeler Ridge, come right through the center of Bryan and go all the way out to Traditions on the west side. So it's a very unusual looking precinct.
And I think there was some discussion about the new boundaries being Highway 30, so that's where that ended up. Right?
There was a strong discussion about that, if you don't mind. And the redistricting process, we had some voting precincts in 2 that were over 1,100, so they had to be reduced.
Right.
And then also the other thing is that you don't want to split neighborhoods. And although Highway 30 doesn't seem like it would be a neighborhood on either side of the road, they all have College Station addresses. They're in the Bryan ETJ. They have College Station wastewater service, which College Station hadn't extended those services out that far. So it's almost a no man's land, and it really does fit together as a neighborhood, Charles. But that wasn't what the court decided to do. We split it right down Highway 30 because we felt like it'd be easier to determine where the boundaries were.
Yeah. So by the time of the November, whoever wins in March and then in November, obviously, you would have been in for 2 years or a little bit more.
Absolutely.
During the last 2 years, I'm sure you just haven't been sitting around. You've been doing some things. What are some things that you would consider your best accomplishments?
First of all, Charles, I'll tell you, whenever I came on board, never having served in public office before besides being a precinct chair, I met with staff and I said, I want to be the best commissioner that I can be. Certainly I'm filling some big shoes here, but what do I need to do to really be effective? And almost without exception, they said, Russ, just be here regularly. Evidently, other commissioners and commissioners in the past have not been particularly regular in their attendance except at meetings. And one of the things I will tell you is I feel like that if you're paying $87,000 a year for a commissioner, they need to be there every day. So that's one of the things that I've done is
so you have an office in the building?
I do, yes. We've got an office on the 3rd floor of the county administration building.
Got it.
But the next thing that I will tell you is that just the everyday business of Brazos County, we're a huge employer here. Of course, our sheriff's department and our road and bridge department are the two largest.
How many employees do you know?
My goodness,
offhand?
Charles, you caught me at
I'm sorry.
No, I was about to say, I believe the county has over 2,000 employees.
Wow.
I think the sheriff's department has about 900, but if you don't mind, I'll get back with you.
That
We
is
may
totally
we
fine.
may want to correct those numbers. I don't do a head count on it, but I will tell
But
you
it's big.
that we, if you'll remember in the last election cycle, my Democratic opponent didn't really know what the county did. So if you don't mind, I'd like to spend just a second
please.
telling you what I think the county does.
Please do it.
We run the court system, first of all. We run elections. We keep records, so we've got to have a courthouse to keep the birth, death, marriage certificates,
Right.
and that sort of thing. We also keep all the DBAs for businesses that are operating under assumed names or whatever. In addition to that, we do have a health department, which has been very front and center during this pandemic.
Right.
With the exception of the courts and the sheriff's department, I think one of the most important divisions of the county, particularly if you live out in the county, is our road and bridge department.
Right.
And that's a constant struggle. We've got about 482 miles of county roads. 92 of those are not paved yet. So if you can imagine, Charles, to pave a county road with contractor services, right now we're spending about $1.5 million. So we've got over $100 million worth of county roads that need to be paved, and hopefully, in my during my time, we'll get some more of them done. The Road and Bridge Department explained to me that, Russ, of the 482 miles, the ones that are paved are the easy ones. Now we've got to negotiate right away with residents or basically there's other issues. But of that $100 million of county roads, if you can imagine, I've got extremely good experience in road and bridge. And if we can save even 10% of that $100 million, that's $10 million to go back into our budget.
That's
so
a lot.
I, if you'll allow me to, I'll just tell you a little bit about my experience with roads and bridges. Back in the 70s, I took a year out of college because I didn't know what I wanted to be, and worked for TxDOT, running a pavement testing and design laboratory.
Okay.
So not only have I run the proper testing to see that the mix is good, then in 1982, when I graduated A&M with a degree in construction science, I went to work for R.B. Butler here in town.
Okay.
A lot of people don't remember Butler, but they were one of the finest contractors in the state and headquartered right here in Bryan College Station.
Wow.
So I built road and bridges. That was one of the things that we did at Butler. And then, if you can imagine, Charles, the last 20 years, I have worked for an engineering design firm, and they design infrastructure. They design roads, bridges, water lines, wastewater treatment plants, for that matter. So I've got extremely good experience in road and bridges, and I hope that by working closely with our department out there, that we'll be able to reduce those costs a little bit.
Yeah. So I've talked to you. You briefly mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, but you've mentioned before about a mental health clinic. And
Yes.
what I wanted to ask you, though, is before my time at Habitat for Humanity and doing this podcast, I actually worked briefly for a cabinet company, Kentmore Cabinets. And we actually were involved in building a mental health clinic down in I guess Rock Prairie Road.
South College Station.
And then it seemed to have shut down, and now there's talk about it again. Am I understanding?
If we have time, I'd like to talk at length about that.
Sure,
because
let's
what
see.
I'll tell you is I've done a lot of research on why that previous clinic didn't work. And the general consensus of people that I've spoken to is that there was some poor management practices there. It is tough right now to find mental health care professionals, psychiatrists, and psychologists. In other words, there's a shortage in that field right now. However, we're unique in that if a person, and I think I've told you this before, Charles, our sheriff's department handles the mental health cases in town. They deal with over 500 per year.
Wow.
So the urgency for us is not just taking care of our citizens here, but every time we pick up a mental health care patient, we have to designate a sheriff's deputy to take them to either Austin or Houston, which is a full day off the streets. And a great deal of expense for us. So we could save money by having a local clinic. But what I will tell you, we are working diligently to try to incentivize another company to coming in. And that actual facility, which was an on-campus facility, if you will, you knowing it as well as I do, we did have a different substance abuse group that came in and took that building. So that building's not available. So we've got to find suitable places. And if you can imagine, Bryan College Station, a number of those mental health care incidents or cases are actually students that are just overstressed, overpressured, or whatever.
Sure.
And they usually spent, I understand, about 5 to 7 days in the facility here. But then if they needed longer term care, they would go back to their home where their family could pay more attention on their care and their needs and everything.
Got it.
So we probably don't need as many beds for long-term care. A usual visit might be 30 days. Our visits here are more probably like 7 days. So.
Okay. Well, that helps, because I was very curious about that.
We are working diligently through EDC. Matt Prohaska over at our economic development has interviewed a number of people, and we do have one provider that is interested in Bryan College Station, and they serve other communities our size around the state. What their initial thought was to have, you'll have to help me with the terminology, but not the long-term care here, but like immediately bringing them in, and I know the correct terminology.
It's like initial care. Something like that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. But yes,
I might be wrong.
No, I think that's exactly right. But then they want to move them to one of their other facilities.
Yeah.
Although I don't really understand the process, I think we would prefer to have that on-site care here in Bryan College Station.
Yeah, I think it would be a huge asset. Definitely. Let's switch to growth in Brazos County, especially in the ETJ outside of city limits. Obviously, the cities themselves are growing, but that seems to be a really kind of a hot button issue, and has been for a number of years. You were actually elected to the policy committee for the Conference of Urban Counties. Is this one way that you're, as a county, trying to look at the growth going on in this community?
Absolutely.
And what does it do?
Okay. You got me. So
there's
so
question.
Many issues that I could handle there. I want you to help keep me on track.
All right.
First of all, our population went to 234,000, which means we are an urban county.
Right.
In other words, up until now, we were right on the borderline, but we are a full-fledged urban county now.
Okay.
Secondly, that growth is projected over the next 10 years until we get to the next census. To maybe even increase another 60 or 70,000. So we are growing here exponentially. Secondly, TxDOT has planned Interstate 14 to come through Bryan College Station, and if you can imagine, that brings a tremendous opportunity for growth to have an interstate highway. We're currently the largest community in the United States not served by an interstate highway. You've heard me say that before.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be great. However, there are some unintended consequences that come along with that.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. 14 is the current alignment seems to be it's going to follow 190 through Hearn and then down to Huntsville, down Highway 30. But they're also planning a loop around town. They're going to call it 214. At least at this time, that's how it's designated. And that loop would actually go out to the east side of town, maybe through Curtin. And if we do that, we're going to take some family farms and some houses. There's some houses to be displaced, which is a huge problem for an unintended consequence of our growth, if you will. But actually, that Regional Mobility Authority, the RMA, which was created, is the only opportunity that the county gets to have input on the alignment of that thing.
Okay.
So it's extremely important. I will tell you, Charles, I don't love the way that they're talking about financing the RMA. They're actually talking about an additional $10 fee on each one of our vehicle registrations to finance that.
Okay.
I would love to finance that thing by a user tax. So back to your question about being on the policy committee for urban counties, currently the state would not allow us to fund our RMA that way. However, if I'm on that policy committee and interacting with the legislature over time, there's a good chance that we could influence that and possibly get a different funding source for the RMA. So that's important.
Yeah.
The second thing is, just in the last week, it became evident that Brazos County does not have any current ordinances or laws on the books regarding sexually oriented businesses. Well, with an interstate highway coming through here, Charles, again, those unintended consequences, that's going to happen.
What you mean.
So it's important now that we develop some ordinances and some rules, if you will, to restrict, because certainly we don't want those type businesses by our schools or where children would be,
Or your farm.
absolutely. So it's such a huge question, and I may have gotten off track just a little bit there, but
no, I wanted to. I'm glad you brought up I-14 because it's a great example. How do you, I don't know if you do it through the policy committee we discussed or some other venue, but how do you balance this tremendous growth that it sounds like you're, for the most part, for, but expecting? How do you balance that with the other issue of trying to maintain a certain amount of family farms, things like that? Is it even possible to do that?
Charles, I think it is possible, and what I'll tell you is I believe most of us that live here recognize that we have a very special living situation here. I mean, we get to be close to the larger cities, you know, and have all of those amenities, but we also still feel like a hometown. You know, this is a place that you want to raise your kids. So I think there is a balance that we've got to strike, and a part of that is to have a good master plan for the entire county. Because
is there not one currently?
I don't think we do. We're currently not very good at planning. I'll just give you a quick example. Our needs assessment for our own facilities was last worked on in 2005. So we're 20 years down, almost 20 years down the road. We just purchased a property from Brazos Independent School District downtown.
Cool building.
Paid $2.3 million, and I personally believe that just the location, being right by the courthouse, and there not being any other property for sale near the courthouse as the county continues to grow, I think it was a great purchase. However, we don't have any plan whatsoever how we're even going to use that thing. So I think it's important that we do some master planning with our own needs, but also on how we would like to see the county grow and try to push it in that direction. Currently, a lot of our growth has been in the city limits, in the corporate city limits. And as you know, the ETJ, the cities can expand out into the county as they grow. One of the current issues regarding growth that I'll share with you is the city of Bryan has permitted a wastewater treatment plant outside of their city limits in the county, down near Cole Lane and Enchanted Oaks, down Highway 30. Got it. And the citizens were totally unaware of this until the TCEQ started having hearings on this thing. Well, because of the quality of life that they have down there, large lots, you know, 2, 3, 5 acre lots, and very quiet. You know, you add a wastewater treatment facility, a 12 MGD wastewater treatment facility right at the end of your street. It changes. It's a paradigm shift. Now, do we need that for growth in the county? Of course. You know, in other words, part of the way now that a lot of the county subdivisions, if you will, or development, they use septic systems, which means you've got to have a certain size lot, so you can't have as much density. But I'm not crazy about the fact that when you put a modern septic system in, an aerobic system, if you will, that the county health department requires a $300 per year contract to have a contractor come out and inspect it. Well, it makes sense because it is a mechanical device
more
that
technical.
that could fail over time. However, that citizen, they're paying wastewater service, whether they realize it or not. That's a deal. So I actually met with a developer just in the last few days that's planning a development down Highway 1179, Farm Road 1179, and they're actually considering a mud district. And the new development near the racetrack in College Station is a mud district also. So that's one of the things that I personally like. I think that we're better served having professional wastewater service instead of having a bunch of individual septic systems where we're dispersing the effluent above ground on your lot and everything. So,
well, let's switch gears then to a topic that you've discussed numerous times over the last couple of years, and then that is broadband and a need for having better internet in the county. I assume your stance on that hasn't changed.
Oh, no, not at all, Charles. In fact, we're moving forward. I'll give you a couple of details. First, in our county, because we have a lot of oak trees in the county, wireless broadband has its limitations. And we do have some very good carriers and service providers here in the county. However, there are a number of citizens outside of the city limits that not only don't have high-speed internet service, but sometimes their only option is to use a satellite service. I personally have that situation, and what I'm going to tell you is, I know we spend over $160 a month for very poor quality service. My wife could not work from home in her last position because of the VPN. It had to be a certain speed and bandwidth to be able to work from home. I also know during the pandemic, it's become very clear to us that as children and students try to go to school at home, if you're in the county, you're at a great disadvantage. An educational disadvantage. And I choose to live in the county because I have a farm, I have livestock and all of that. However, to be able to work in the 21st century, we need high-speed internet out there. It's available. I'm asking very, very, very regularly, our Commissioners Court, we were given $44 million of relief money, if you will, from the Fed. $22 million of that is actually in the bank, earning very low interest, and it's been there over a year. We do have a consultant that's telling us how to use it, although I personally think we may be overpaying that consultant. If you're interested in the number, it's over $1 million of that $22 million. However, we've not taken any action with that money. And being a businessman, what I get is, as inflation goes up, if you're earning very low interest on that money, you're losing buying power. And I have had some presentations that suggest for $5 million of that money that we could have high-speed internet countywide. The furthest person out in the county could have high-speed internet at a very reasonable cost. $50 a month being the target.
What would you say to the people that would say that those that live in the rural part of the county, there's a trade-off there, is that you get this quality of life that they want, raise livestock, all that kind of thing, but in return you may not have as many of the services. Do you feel that broadband is in a different category, or where are you at?
I couldn't agree more with that thought, and I recognize I choose to live in the county. I can live in town if I'd like to. However, because of the pandemic, it's caused us to recognize that if we can't go into town to an office, if you will, or a space, it becomes almost impossible to be able to work from home or to go to school from home. I think that broadband could be more described as transportation, or a parallel with our transportation system. Just because you live in the county doesn't mean that you don't have a road to get to your property. And truthfully, as the internet has become more and more a regular part of our daily business, I think it's important that we provide that service to people that live out in the county also.
So, housing affordability, with the last few minutes that we have left, we got about 5 minutes. Real quickly, I did want to touch on this, that the county and outside of the city limits is, I believe, becoming more and more of an important opportunity for, you could call it affordable housing, more affordable housing, especially things like modular homes
Yes.
on, let's say, an acre lot. There are a lot of young families that are likely looking at that, looking at Bryan, prices going up, the need to get out there. Do you think there is a place for I would say, more affordable housing type outside of the city limits?
I couldn't agree more that there is. In other words, what I believe is the outer part of Precinct 2, which is what I'm very
Right.
concerned about, generally has BTU utilities, which are somewhat less expensive than other utility companies in our area.
Right.
In addition to that, we've got very high quality transportation and roads to those parts of the county. And with our continued growth, one of the things we didn't touch on is that we now have congestion and traffic in the mornings when you're
Yeah.
trying to go to work. And although we don't have a rush hour like maybe they do in Houston or some of the big cities, we do have some rush minutes there that you are greatly slowed down. So, yeah, the part of the county that you're specifically talking about, Precinct 2, has some very good arterials and transportation corridors out there. I'm sure you're aware that the Highway Department is planning on a widening of 1179, which will help. Absolutely, it'll even make it more attractive. So I think the mud districts, in other words, having good quality wastewater service, and I'll just share this with you. In that particular subdivision that I was talking about in Precinct 2, Wixon Water is one of the water providers
Right.
to the county, and they do a great job. I mean, I really think that they're good, that they would actually operate the wastewater service here too.
Right.
So I think we're making inroads. We're setting a good foundation, and absolutely affordable housing. The work Habitat does is amazing in getting people into their own home. That's not only part of the American dream, but once you get your own home, you're a contributing member of our community here. And so yes, I'm very supportive of that. I'm very supportive of development out in the county. I think that's the way that we'll need to go as we continue to grow.
Okay. Well, I know we didn't get to touch on everything that we might have wanted to talk about, but we really appreciate you coming on Think Brazos and talking to us about what you've done and where you think we're headed in the future. And is there anything last minute you wanted to say, or how can people get in touch with you, your campaign, if
Yes.
they should choose to?
If you'd like to get in touch with the campaign, go to our website, Ford for Brazos. We're trying to do a good job of getting our message out that we want to lower taxes. And in all fairness, Charles, because of our personal appraisals, our property appraisals went up so much in the last year.
Right.
And I don't think that's a mistake. I think property values are going up here. But the problem is that people like yourself and me that are on an income path that fits with the ability to live here in Brazos County, we need to lower our tax rate
Yeah.
to the point that people are not priced out of living in Brazos County.
Sure.
So I think that's a very important part of what we've got to do as a Commissioners Court.
Got it. Do you have a website?
Ford for Brazos.
Ford for Brazos. So if someone wants to get in touch, that's how they do it.
Absolutely. Please call me because I am serving. You can also call me as your county commissioner.
Yeah.
Call me at Brazos County.
All right. Well, this is your Precinct 2 County Commissioner running for re-election, Russ Ford. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.